When we typically think about our favorite NBA team, we look at the Giannis's, the Jason Tatum's, the Joel Embiid's, the Nikola Jokic's, the top dogs, the first option, your number one guy, the guy who's really helping the engine hum. But as y'all can see here, every team, for the most part, has an X factor. These are the guys that aren't going to make a wrong play. These are the guys that could win you the game. These are the guys that have a really, really big boom potential with that little dwindling of that bust potential, as you can see with Cam Reddish being on the middle of the screen. But with this second half of the season coming to an open, that makes any sense. We're going to go over every team, at least the ones that are in the playoff hunt. So, sorry to any Pistons, Hornets, Spurs, and whatever. If your team's not, I think how I went about it was if your team's not at least 4 games within the play-in race, I didn't really go through that, but let's get right into it. So we're going to go through it by the conference standings. We're going to start with the Eastern Conference, and as you can probably already think of, one team's really been the head honcho for the most part, and it is the Celtics. So let's get right into it. The X factor for the Celtics I chose, Mike Muscala. Disclaimer, these stats here are through a very small sample size. 3 games with the Celtics, as you can see. He's averaging 13-3, about an assist a game, and barely half a steal and a block. But the splits are looking very nice, so we'll say outside of the free throw percentage. 48% from the field, 39% from the three. I think a guy like Mike Muscala is a move that really went under the radar. He's a very solid stretch big. And when you think about the Celtics and their health at the front court, it's not that it's bad or anything, but we've seen Al Horford miss time. Robert Williams is still getting his feeding back, and Luke Cornett's not necessarily a guy I'd want in my playoff rotation. But what Mike Muscala allows is for the Celtics to run 5 out, and with that, we've seen how much 3-pointers can really help them get over the hump. We saw it with Grant Williams, and not to say Mike Muscala is going to have like a 35-point game like he did, but Mike Muscala could definitely be a difference maker. When you look at the landscape of the NBA, everybody needs almost the ability to shoot threes, unless you're, Jared Allen, DeAndre Ayton to an extent. And Mike Muscala is a guy that, Al Horford, Robert Williams, if any of them go down for a game or two, Mike Muscala, I think, can definitely fill the void. He's not going to, I think, supremely take over, but solid dude. And moving on, the Milwaukee Bucks, Javon Carter. I mean, as a Bucks fan, I love this dude. Treadmill mentality, bulldog, whatever you want to do it, or whatever you want to call him. Javon Carter's him, 100% through and through. But when we look at the stats, 7.5 points, 2.6 rebounds and assists, a steal a game, and about half a block a game. But the splits look pretty solid. 43% from the field isn't too good, but 41.7% from 3 and 81.5% from the line. Very solid. I mean, I think when you look at the iconic kind of one-liners from the league this year, Javon Carter's got to be up there. I woke up when I woke up, whatever it may be. But I think the Bucks are definitely we're gonna see how this next bit's gonna go. Obviously, with Giannis missing the next few games, with thankfully not a serious wrist injury, but with a little swelling or whatever it may be. And with Jay Crowder coming in, we're going to see how the playoff rotation and how Bud's really going to play things out. And I think Javon Carter has more than earned a spot in that playoff rotation. And when you look at it, Drew is a guy who is obviously our best defender when it comes to the guard position / wings. But we also depend a lot of him on the offensive end. And having to juggle those two can be very draining to a player. Now, you got a guy like Javon Carter who can definitely take some of that pressure off. I have no problem putting him on the best ball handler, and he's a dog, 100% through and through. So, Javon Carter's a guy can heat up at times, and when we look at the Bucks, I think he's in the perfect situation. Moving on. This one's a little obvious because I think it's been like well-known kind of storyline throughout this season. For the most part, Tyrese Maxey, once he came back from his injury, was coming off the bench. But De'Anthony Melton, super, super solid dude. Wherever he's gone, he's been a solid contributor. The Suns, in his first stint, it was aight. When you saw him go to the Memphis Grizzlies, really played a solid tandem in the backcourt for the backups with Tyus Jones. And when you look at his stats, pretty solid. basically 11 points, 4 rebounds, almost 3 assists, and a steal and a half a game. Mwah. And that beautiful almighty 40% for the 3-point line. Now, when you look at the Sixers, I don't think it's crazy to say they have the best depth when it comes to the backcourt. You know, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, Anthony Melton, Shake Milton's even getting some solid burn there, and not Shake Milton, DeAnthony Melton I think is a guy that can really, really contribute to winning basketball. You know, we've seen him do that with the Grizzlies last year, and now he's been very successful with the Sixers. So the Sixers, I think, are a team that are probably one of the biggest ones that people are going to be paying attention to in terms of how they're performing in the playoffs, and if it does end in sadness in terms of them getting eliminated, we're going to see how that team's going to shape up to be within the offseason upcoming. But, you know, DeAnthony Melton I think is a guy that will definitely play a solid role, could win you some games, and has been very solid overall this season. All right, Cleveland Cavaliers. I went with a little bit of a bias pick here. I'm a big Caris LeVert fan. He's been kind of stinking it up, but when Caris LeVert is on, ain't too many people in the league are stopping him. You know, when you look at the production, it's not great. It's not terrible. 12 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal a game. The splits are pretty horrendous. I mean, Caris LeVert is a guy who can definitely. Put it like this. He's a tough shot taker, can be a tough shot maker at times, but the consistency is the thing that's always kind of been plaguing him. You know, he's either giving you 20 or he's giving you 5. No real in between. But when you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, outside of Darius Garland, you know, Donovan Mitchell, obviously, there aren't too many guys who can create for themselves. You know, Evan Mobley, he's shown bits of that, but I think a lot of those are still not necessarily something I would rely on in the playoffs. Jared Allen's obviously not going to do anything like that. And Danny Green, their new acquisition, who's probably going to be their starting small forward. We all know he doesn't create for himself, but Caris LeVert has that ability. And I think when you look at, if you're in a situation where Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell aren't really able to get themselves going, or it's kind of like a situation where they're always getting double teamed whenever they handle the ball, Caris LeVert is definitely a guy who can win you a game or two. Now, again, consistency is everything. I hope that Caris is able to do that. But I think the acquisition of Danny Green is really going to help in that. I think it cements that Caris LeVert will kind of be your sixth man. Because I think a lot of the time throughout the season, it's been he had the starting role from the beginning and then kind of split time between coming off the bench, being back in the starting lineup. And when you do that to a player, the rhythm, I think, is something that can be a really big concern. So hopefully with Danny Green coming to the team, kind of solidify Caris in a role and allow him to not only just figure it out, but thrive in that. So, you know, I'm still a big believer. I just hope I'm not wrong. All right, the Brooklyn Nets. This one's another kind of obvious one. Cam Thomas, you know, we've all watched the scoring explosion. This is a guy that has definitely always been a bucket, just never really had the chance playing behind guys like Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. But now, with this new look Nets team, I think he's kind of been stamped into that six-man role right now. You know, typically they start Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and obviously Nicholas Claxton. And I think Cam Thomas, this is the perfect role for him, you know. I think the thing with him, why he's not a starter, is that he's not really giving you too much else outside of the scoring. As you can see, you know, not even 2 rebounds, an assist and a half in a game. And he's just strictly there to get buckets. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not doing it at a super supreme elite level, that's what allows you to slot into that six-man role. And I think there's nothing wrong with that as well. Cam Thomas is a bucket through and through. I mean, the splits are pretty solid. You know, 45.8% from the field, 41% from the three, 85% from the line. You know, I think when you look at this Brooklyn team, as much as you lost with Kyrie and KD, I said this on the podcast with my homies, the Blacktop podcast, which if you're already on this channel, I mean, assuming you know about that, but this team is giving very much, you know, that 2018, 2019 Nets vibes. You know, Kyrie was hurt, and it was just all good vibes. I'm excited to see how the rest of the season turns out for the Nets. You know, I think if they're able to stay afloat and stay in the playoff hunt, Jacque Vaughn definitely should garner some Coach of the Year votes, but right now I think it's probably locked up as Joe Mazzulla. However, when you just look at this team's future, the potential assets they can covet, the potential assets they already have, I'm hoping Cam Thomas, I was going to say Calm, hoping that Cam Thomas is a part of that for sure. And there's no doubt in my mind that I think he could develop into one of the more elite scorers in this league for sure. Josh Hart for the Knicks. Yeah, this one's another kind of, you've seen the 3 games he's played so far, and you're already thinking, oh yeah, this could work. You know, the Knicks were humming heading into the heading into the All-Star break. And you saw Josh Hart's really running really well with that team in the very, very small sample size. We'll see what happens with these next like 25 games or so. But we see that Josh Hart is a part of that closing lineup. You know, I think that as much as players, or not even players, because I think players understand, but as much as, you know, the I don't want to say casuals, because I don't like that otherization, but for the sake of argument or whatever, the casual fan, I don't think understands that as much as being a starter is, you know, that kind of coveted position, what you really want to be, especially in playoff basketball, you want to be in that closing lineup. And we've seen Josh Hart do that in the past 3 games that he's played. And you can see why. You know, he's a very well-rounded player. I think when you look at how the Knicks are built, you know, you always want to say he's the perfect player for this, perfect player for that. I think Josh Hart's those one of kind of jack of all trades guys, and that's something you really need on a team, especially to be successful on the playoff run. I mean, very solid splits and shootings throughout, stats throughout. You know, 10 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, steal a game. And the one thing I would love to see, and you saw that he was shooting it, is definitely seeing him shoot the 3 a bit more, because, you know, we always think about this drive and kick NBA, and I think with the fact of how the Knicks are assembled again, should definitely be a thing. You know, Josh Hart, I think you want to give him all the confidence to shoot the 3, and we've seen that he can knock it down at times. Just a matter of getting that consistency down. But Josh Hart, I think, is a guy. Oh my gosh, that was so weird. Josh Hart's a guy that every NBA team would want. There's not a shadow of a doubt. You call every other team, they would give up something for Josh Hart. All right, the Heat. This one's a little bit of a recency bias, but when you look at the Miami Heat, outside of guys like Tyler Hero and Max Strus, Gabe Vincent to an extent, Kyle Lowry at times, there's not really too much stretching happening. You know, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are your 2 big, like, kind of centerpieces, and neither of them are consistent from the 3-point line. Now, add Kevin Love to that, you might have something cooking. Now, I'm not saying Kevin Love's going to come back being that 20 and 20, like Timberwolves Kevin Love that everybody knows and loves, or if you don't, you should definitely look it up. But Kevin Love is a guy who's only a year removed from being a 6th Man of the Year candidate. You know, I think he ended 2nd or 3rd in that, but when you look at how he was playing with the Cavs, I don't really understand, because he was still getting like similar burn to where he was getting at, but perhaps, you know, maybe he just wants like a better opportunity. Can't blame him for that. I mean, he's coming out the final year of like what was once the worst contract in NBA history to an extent, or at the time in the league. But I'm excited to see this next chapter for him. You know, obviously it's the winding down years, and he's definitely just probably going to spot up for the most part, grab a few boards, as you can see with his stats. But Kevin Love fixes a really big hole when it comes to the Heat in terms of stretching the floor. You know, when you think about the starting lineup, I think you obviously probably run something along the lines of, you know, actually that might be a little, when you think about it, probably like Kyle Lowry, obviously, even though as much as he's been cheeks, you definitely still got to start him. Probably start Lowry, Hero, Butler, and I think for sake of size, you do start Kevin Love, and you got Bam, and then off the bench, it's actually pretty solid when you think about it. The Martin brother, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, solid. And, you know, we'll see what happens. Kevin Love is a guy I think definitely has been deserving of a starting role to an extent. And this is probably one of, if not the only places where that might happen. And I could be completely wrong, and he plays that 6-man role. But either way, he really helps stretch the floor for this Miami Heat team. So it should be solid. For the Hawks, this one's a hot topic because, you know, obviously Nate McMillan just got let go. And I think that was never really... I think they saw him take over mid-year and just thought, okay, this is our guy. And then as you see, once you start to get the full years under his belt, we see what happens now. But when you look at the Atlanta Hawks, this is a guy I've been really falling in love with. No, this is one of my favorite rookies in this class, AJ Griffin Jr. Dude's a dog, you know. I think he's got 2 or 3 game winners on the year, shooting basically 40% from the 3 as a rookie. You know, him and Keegan Murray right there in terms of being, you know, some of the better shooters. And the splits overall are very, very solid. You know, he's only a few off of being 50, 40, 90 as a rookie. Well, obviously with the free throw percentage, you'd have to hit much more. But getting away from that, you know, he doesn't do much outside of shooting the ball. 9.3 points, 2.1 rebounds, and assists, a steal a game. But I think that's perfectly what you want for this Hawks team. It's you got 2 of your superstars who, again, aren't the best when it comes to shooting the 3. You know, DeJounte Murray is probably the worst of the 2, but the 2 of them can definitely hit it, but it's not at a consistent clip that you would want from a guy that's taking so many shots. Now, the counterpoint to that is that you're able to surround them with shooters. You know, you got John Collins. I mean, John Collins is probably the worst option, actually, but, you know, you get a guy like AJ Griffin, you got Saddiq Bey, and DeAndre Hunter. You have these guys that can definitely help stretch the floor out, and when you have players who are your centerpieces who are taking a lot of the usage, surrounding them with shooters has always been kind of this remedy. And I think when you look at AJ Griffin, his size, the potential, he should definitely be getting a bit more burn, I would hope. Now with the acquisition of Saddiq Bey, it's kind of made it hard, but AJ Griffin, he's a young guy coming out of Duke, and I think he has the potential to really be something solid in this league. And I hope that's still with the Hawks. If not, though, I'm sure whichever team he plays for will always be exciting to watch. Heading on, the Washington Wizards. Another kind of cop out here, Deni Avdija. The splits aren't looking too good, but when you look at how he's been playing since the Rui Hachimura got traded, Deni Avdija is him, man, through and through. He's another one of those nice young solid wings coming into the league, and when you just look at him, the build, the slight playmaking he provides, I think it's exactly what the Wizards needs with this mid-ass team that they got. But I mean, when you look at it, Bradley Beal, I think he's a solid playmaker, but through and through, I think he's still a 2 at heart. Kyle Kuzma can play make to an extent. Kristaps Porzingis is mainly there to just score the ball. Deni Avdija, I think, could be the connector to a lot of that, and hopefully as you allow him to get his confidence, allow him to continue to grow, only gets better from there. Toronto Raptors. Now this one's a little weird just because, like, for the most part, I try not to choose starters, but I think Gary Trent Jr., I'm not saying he's for sure going to go to the bench. However, there's a big, I don't want to say, I'll say it. There's a big dilemma with OG Anunoby coming back where, you know, I think you definitely should start Jakob Poeltl, especially if you're planning on retaining him to an extent. And with that allows Pascal to play his more natural position at the 4. And then that just kind of moves everybody back a bit to where, who are you going to start as your technical 2 guard? Do you start OG Anunoby, one of the best defenders in the league, or Gary Trent Jr., who's a bucket, as well as your best 3-point shooter? I think that's the big thing Nick Nurse has to deal with heading into this last stretch of the season. And if you had to ask me, we've seen Gary Trent Jr. play that 6-man role very effectively. And if I were Nick Nurse, I think you'd do the same thing. You know, Gary Trent Jr. is a guy who's able to create his own offense to an extent, plays the passing lanes a little too much sometimes. However, dude's a bucket through and through. I don't think he's too far away from averaging 20 points in a season consistently. And when you look at the payday that's coming up for him, very, very, very nice indeed, I will say. And to an extent, he's a guy that can win you a game. He's a guy that can help, like, shoot you into the stratosphere or completely come crashing down, especially when he's not hitting a shot. However, you know, if I had to pick, I think you'd go with a guy who's able to create his own offense more so. That'd be Gary Trent Jr. Could be a 6-man of the year if he was playing that throughout the whole season. All right. Ayo Dosunmu for the Bulls. You know, I think everybody's looking at this Patrick Beverley deal. You know, you can say he's the savior or whatnot, but it's another hometown kid coming back to the Shy. That sounded so weird, but it's it's another hometown dude coming back to Chicago. And when you look at Ayo Dosunmu, he's definitely the future for that team. Not saying he's like going to be the bona fide #1 stud. However, it's just the storyline in itself. You know, the hometown kid grew up in Chicago, stayed home and played at Illinois, and fulfilled every Chicago kid's dream of playing for his Bulls. And as much as you bring Patrick Beverley to be, you know, a feisty guard, I think it's similar to how we saw Anthony Edwards develop defensively, to where Ayo Dosunmu is going to be able to pick Patrick Beverley's brain. And whether you like it or not, Patrick Beverley's been one of the better guard defenders in this league in the past few bits. And I think Ayo's going to be able to improve off of that. Not only that, the playmaking can be solid at times. Saw last year where we had a whole bunch of like 10 plus assist games. I think one was against the Celtics. And what you're really just hoping for is that he's able to improve 3-point shooting, for sure. And when you look to the Bulls' future, it's one that's a little bleak. Can't lie about that. However, I think Ayo's definitely a little bright spot there. All right, the Pacers. We're going to go with Aaron Nesmith here. I think Aaron Nesmith's a guy who's like slightly resurrected his career to an extent. You know, coming out of Vanderbilt, I think he shot like 50% from the 3 out of college, which is insane. And he's never really been able to recapture that. But on this Indiana team, you know, I think he's started to really settle in to an extent. We'll see how the rest of the season goes, but when you look at the splits, look at the stats, it's not terrible. Could always be better. However, when you look at you're coming off of an All-Star break with Tyrese Halliburton, just has this new motivation, played his first All-Star game. You're coming in with Miles Turner. You know, when you just look at the squad overall, it shouldn't be too bad. I think they should definitely be in the play-in, but you saw how you lose the point guard, the guy who was running the entire engine, and you kind of... No, but I think Aaron Nesmith is a guy that if he's finding his shot consistently, scary hours for sure. And I think they're only with time he's going to be able to do that more. All right, last one for the Eastern Conference, Mr. I don't know why I chose this picture, but Jonathan Isaac. The per 36 numbers look very solid. I'm not saying that's how he's going to shoot, because look at those crazy ass splits. However, with the waiving of RJ Hampton, and with the fact that there's a lot of guard play already, you know, Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, Gary Harris, Jonathan Isaac, I think, is going to take up a lot of those RJ Hampton minutes. And I'm not saying he's going to blossom into this DPOY player a lot of people thought he could ascend to be, but having those extra minutes, and I think you'll be able to play a really big lineup where you probably got Markelle, well, not Markelle, part of the big, but you probably run something like Markelle, Franz, Jonathan Isaac, Paolo Banchero, and even actually you could probably play like a crazy, that would be insane. Can you imagine a lineup where you got Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter Jr., and Bol Bol? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that would just be insane to think of. But to get back to the thing, Jonathan Isaac, you know, it's great to see him playing basketball again. It's been a long 2 years. And we've seen his ability to still be consistent in an extent of being efficient with his playing time. He hasn't really broken anything above like 10-15 minutes. And again, with the waiving of RJ Hampton, I would assume that this is just making room for him to take up some more minutes. Now we're getting to the Western Conference, and let's get right into it. So, the top of the cream, the top of the top right now when it comes to the West, the Denver Nuggets. Bruce Brown Jr., you know, Swiss Army knife, do it all dude, gadget guy, whatever term you want to use, Bruce Brown does it all. I mean, when you look at splits, pretty solid, 11.3, or when you look at stats, you know, 11.3 points, basically 4 assists, 4 rebounds, and a steal and a block a game. You know, if that doesn't scream do it all, I don't know what does. And even the splits are pretty solid, 49.1% from the field, basically 39% from the 3. Free throw line can always be a little better, but Bruce Brown is another one of those guys where if you call every team, they're going to want him without a shadow of a doubt. You know, Bruce Brown Jr., very solid dude. And there's just not much else to say. You know, he's a guy that every team would want. He's a guy that does a bit of everything. And he's just you've always seen him be only 6'4", but he never really plays like it. All right, heading up next, Zaire Williams for the Grizzlies. Now, he's a guy that, don't look at the splits because, he hasn't really, I think, he hasn't really been able to establish a solid rhythm throughout this entire season. I think a lot of that has to do with the injury, as well as the fact that he hasn't been able to kind of hold down his backup wing role that he had last year. But, you have this bit of off time to recover, get your mind right, get your body right, whatever it may be. I think you see again, because that kind of happened last year as well in his rookie season, where, the start of the year wasn't all so good, but the second half of the season was a lot better. I'm not really spending too much time looking at the splits and all that, because again, I think you miss a lot of the time in the beginning of the year, and you're just kind of trying to catch up. So I don't want to dwell too much on that. But Zaire Williams is a guy, 6'8", a lot of length, provides some solid defending, which the Grizzlies definitely need. Can stretch the floor at times, and I just hope, and I have the confidence that he'll get back to that kind of role where he was at last year. All right, the Kings. Everybody's kind of, Cinderella story, whatever it may be, the thing you didn't see coming out of nowhere. I'm going to choose Malik Monk here, mainly for the fact that he's a guy that I think could win you a playoff game. He's a guy that I think not going to win you the whole series, but, could have a Grant Williams, Brook Lopez-esque moment where he's not the number one guy, but he's playing like it for damn sure. And when you look at the splits, it's not too nice, but, I think there's no doubt that when you look at that team, the best shot creator is Malik Monk. Right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Malik Monk's definitely the best shot creator when you look at that team. And again, when it comes to playoff basketball, I think a lot of it comes down to the ability to create your own shot, especially in the half court. And as much as I think the Kings are successful in how they're able to play that two-man game with Sabonis and Fox, if a team's able to key in on that, I think you look to a guy like Malik Monk to really help you get the ground running and stuff like that. All right, for the Clippers, Mason Plumlee, Mason Plumlee was looking like fucking Magic Johnson at times of the season. But he's a guy that I think I talked about it on the podcast earlier where he just gives them a different look. And I think that's what you need from this team for the Clippers who, have always had these playoff aspirations, or not even playoff aspirations, championship aspirations, but be it the injuries, always tend to fall a little short. But now, we've all been talking about how they're the deepest team in the league, and time for them to prove it. Mason Plumlee is a guy that, again, gives the opposing team a different look at the center. It's not just Ivica Zubac holding it down there. Got another guy who can not only be, solid at the rim at times, obviously by that 67.3% from the field, but could potentially be a tertiary playmaker. And hopefully there's times where Ty Lue trusts him to be a bit of a playmaker, because I think that would just, again, give a team a different look. And yeah, Mason Plumlee. Him. Nah, but let's head on. So for the Suns, I got TJ Warren here. I think a big storyline for this trade deadline was guys coming back home. TJ Warren's a guy that fits that narrative. And we've seen how he's showcased a bit of his ability to come back in the sense of he's able to create his own shot. He's able to hit three. Now, when you look at the Suns, he was kind of, I think, the one thing that made me personally go from it's a solid trade on both ends to where you question if the Suns gave up way too much for, 3 good years of KD, which is still a lot better than some guys' whole careers. But, TJ Warren's a guy that I think really shells up your bench. That's kind of the big thing I was questioning heading into this trade. And hopefully TJ Warren's able to continue to get onto the pathway of getting back to where he was in the bubble. I'm not saying he's going to show up and be the Jordan again, but you never know. All right, the Mavericks. Another kind of outlier slash, I'm not trying to pick starters, but here's a starter. Or I guess not really a starter, but a closer, Christian Wood. When you look at the Mavs, I think as great as a scoring punch that Luka and Kyrie can provide, you're really looking on that team for your third scorer. And I think Christian Wood could/should be that guy. You know, I think Josh Green makes it like a little too tight in terms of that dynamic of the guards and the wings, but Christian Wood being able to get, a couple post touches a game, stretching out from the floor, picking pops, whatever it may be. I'm a big Christian Wood fan. He's a guy that could be 20 and 10 on another team, no problem. You've really seen him take up his free throw percentage, because last year, man, it was not looking that real good. Now, as you see here, 75.8%. That's super solid. Splits overall, very solid. And again, when you look at this Mavericks team, as much as you're questioning what's going to happen on the defensive end, when you look at the offense, you're just wondering who's going to be able to help/create outside of Luka and Kyrie. I think Christian Wood can definitely help alleviate some of that stress from those two. All right, for the Pelicans, outside of a healthy team, I think their X factor is going to be Herb Jones here, mainly for the fact that can he hit his threes? I think when you look at the personnel, especially with the top guys of the Pelicans, outside of CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram doesn't shoot too many threes. We all know Zion doesn't shoot too many threes. And then Jonas Valanciunas, who's their starter, doesn't really close out games, doesn't shoot too many threes. I think that can be something that could really, really burn the Pelicans in the playoffs, especially when, teams are able to clog up the paint, whatever it may be. And you look to Herb Jones as this guy who's, one of already the best wing defenders. But when you look at that 3-point percentage, that's something that kind of turns you off to an extent. And you got to think that how they play, he's going to spot up in the corner. Is he going to be able to knock that shot down? I think that's the big thing with Herb. And that's kind of the big thing with this team overall is how are they going to look when they're healthy? How are they going to operate in the half court? How are they going to operate when things start to tighten up? I haven't really seen that. I don't doubt that they can figure it out. But if there's a guy that I'm looking at to be this guy that could come out of nowhere and not only play solid defense, which he already does, but maybe hit a few shots, it's Herb Jones. All right. Next up, the Timberwolves. Jaylen Nowell. He's a guy that I think has been a super solid bench player, super solid scorer. And another guy I could probably give love to is Mike Conley, because I think, quickly to get this little aside from Mike Conley, I think what he does is he really, really, really helps to kind of settle everything in terms of the playmaking. D'Lo, as much as like he was technically the point guard, he was more the combo guard in how he looked to get his own shot, his own offense going. Mike Conley, he could probably go like 5-2 and like 12 and be fine. Now, getting back to it, Jaylen Nowell. When you look at this team starting five, solid, no doubt. Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jalen McDaniels, Cat when he comes back, and Rudy. That's a pretty solid starting five. But when you look at 6 through 9, it's looking a little dicey. And the one guy I think has really helped to alleviate that is Jaylen Nowell. He's been able to, generate his own offense to an extent. The splits aren't looking too solid, especially from the 3, but, he's a guy that could be your microwave. All right, not could be, he is your microwave. And when you look at the Timberwolves and how this team's going to operate when the starting 5, or at least when guys like Anthony Edwards aren't on the floor, he's a guy I think could really help alleviate while Ant gets that break. All right, moving on to the Warriors. This is a guy I'm very, very sad to see on another team. As a Bucks fan, I wanted him to be a part of the franchise for a while, but with my mother being a Warriors fan, I take some solace in knowing that the big Ragu, Donte DiVincenzo, is still doing work on a solid team. Now, when you look at the Warriors, undoubtedly, I think they're the most disappointing team of the year so far. They're this team that was supposed to defend their crown, and right now it's looking a little shaky. However, whatever you want to contribute it to, I don't have any doubts that they'll be in the playoffs this year for sure. And I think a big part of that, especially when you look at their bench, is Donte DiVincenzo. 9 points per game, 4 rebounds, which is very solid like stats for a guard. 3.3 assists, steal and a half basically, and on fairly solid efficiency, especially when looking at the 3, 41.6%. He's a guy that's been able to hit some big shots this year, and undoubtedly he's going to have to keep doing that if the Warriors want to stay afloat without Steph for this last little bit. But when you look at it, the potential defensive lineup with Donte DiVincenzo and Gary Payton II, very intriguing for sure, no doubt. Alright, heading to the Thunder. This is a guy that, can you imagine if he was still with the Sixers? Whew, that team would be looking rock solid already than it more. That team would be looking a lot more solid than it already is. But Isaiah Joe, he is a guy that look at the 3-point percentage, 45.2%. That is absolutely insane. I was hoping he would have been the 3-point contest, but that's neither here nor there. Looking at him, the Thunder have kind of stated that they want him to be a part of this sort of long-term project. And I agree. I think Isaiah Joe is a super solid dude. He's able to obviously hit the three from a solid clip. And we see how he's able to really be a part of that catch and shoot mode. And when you look at this team with their personnel, that's what you really need. You know, you got Giddey, who's obviously a very solid pass first guard. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Canadian boy, operates a lot in the half court and generating his own offense. And got a guy like Isaiah Joe, who's able to spot up, hit the threes when you need. Might even do a little bit more than that. And when you look at this OKC Thunder team, I think there's value. You know, JJ Redick talked about it with the Magic, where there's value in playing solid, high pressure basketball if you're a young team. And when you look at this the picks and all that, what is a team really going to do if they got 19 plus picks and they only have 15 spots? So I think a guy like Isaiah Joe is in a nice solid spot. You know, when you look at this OKC Thunder team, hopefully they are able to make a late kind of play-in push. And Isaiah Joe is definitely a guy who could have a Grant Williams type performance where I don't know where he hits 6+ threes. All right, next up with the Jazz. Now, with all like the trades they make, all the pieces they gave up, you got to think that they might be just trying to tank at this point in the season. Nah, but to get off of that kind of negative notion, Ochai Agbaji I think is their X factor. You've seen how in the beginning of the year, get too much burn if at all, and I always had a solid little spurt here. You know, the splits look solid, 49% from the field, basically 40% from the three. I think the stats overall are just a little skewed by the fact that you got those little parts where he like gets maybe 15, 10, 5 minutes where it's all kind of garbage time. But Ochai Agbaji is a guy that I think could really, really contribute to this team in the future. He's a guy that came in as a senior, and we've looked at these like, I don't really know what the word is if they're older than a freshman, but these kind of second, third year guys who, you know, aren't that sexy blue chip 19-year-old one and done player. Oh, that sounded very, very sus. But Ochai Agbaji is a guy that could, and I think should, contribute to winning basketball. He's a guy when he could have been traded at the deadline, I would feel, but I don't know. I'm just talking up my ass there. But when you look at the future of this Jazz team, I think he's a guy that could contribute to it. And if not, if I'm a team that's looking for, you know, a more mature wing or more mature guy, Ochai Agbaji is a guy I would definitely look to. And hopefully this second half of the season is nice and solid for him. All right, talking about the Trailblazers, my boy, the savior, the only wing that the Trailblazers currently have, Cam Reddish. Now, obviously, that's a joke in terms of the only wing, but I think this is, fingers crossed, this is finally the thing that does it. You know, Cam Reddish is a guy that I think came into the league, you know, had a solid game with the Hawks that one time against the Bucks where he had like 25 in like a quarter or something like that. But I'm just hoping he sticks here. You know, I'm hoping he's able to carve out solid playing time, you know, a solid role, and not eventually end up in a doghouse, which he was with the Knicks. Now, depending on how this next stretch of the season goes for the Trailblazers, I'm fairly confident about it. You know, I'm optimistic about it. And I think not that Cam Reddish is going to be like the focal point or anything, but again, this is the X factor. He's a guy that can get hot, shoot a lot of threes. When you look at the gravity that guys like Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard are able to generate, Cam Reddish is a guy that I think could benefit from that for sure. And last but not least, it's the Lakers. You know, as much as we want to say they're totally no way in how they're gonna make it, when you look at the retooling of this team, you can't help but think that there's a puncher's chance. You had a guy like Malik Beasley, you got D'Lo, Jared Vanderbilt, you know, Rui Hachimura. A lot of those additions are very solid. And I think one that could really fly under the radar is Malik Beasley. 13.3 points, 3.5 rebounds, an assist and a half a game. The field goal percentage isn't too good, but 3-point percentage, when you look at kind of what the Lakers are working with prior to that, it's very solid. I think Malik Beasley has a chance to carve out a nice role of father. No, I'm not going to go there. But when you look at Malik Beasley, he's a solid athlete, solid shooter. I think that's something that the Lakers all really need. And he's a guy that could, again, just like I was talking about with Cam Reddish, the gravity that guys like AD, LeBron, D'Lo at times are able to generate leaves guys open. And Malik Beasley is a guy that I would hope would capitalize on a lot of that. But either way, this has been X Factor. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with any of this. Not that I would really care, but it's nice to have a little dialogue. And regardless, I'll see y'all next time.